Waiting for our intro video.
Powered by Reviting, streaming from the Reviting Digital Studio. It's the David Daily. Exploring frontier technology, artificial intelligence, quantum innovation, and the intersection of faith, funding, and the future. Here's your host, David Goki.
Welcome to another episode of the David Daily Show. And today we're focusing on our special segment where we have guest founders and funders and all things future technology. So today is going to be a really wonderful episode. If you're wondering where we're tuning in from today, we're actually in beautiful, sunny El Tunco in El Salvador, which is in Central America, next to Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And so if you're tuning in, whether it's cold or whether it's rainy or whether it's sunny, thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to the show and like the show. We would love to see, where are you tuning in from? Go ahead and put something in the comments. Just let us know what you're up to. And as well, if you are an investor, a traditional investor, corporate entrepreneur, or if you're an angel investor, a wealthy individual, or if you represent a fund or funding, please apply to be on the show. We would love to have you. We have a wonderful team over at Reviting that takes care of all of the production behind the scenes to go live on LinkedIn and produce a live stream podcast and talk show. But you all know, if you've been watching for a while, I talk a lot. So I'm going to introduce our guest, Aaron McReynolds. Welcome to the stage, Aaron. So great to have you here today. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. If you could just introduce yourself, your background, and tell us, who do you serve, who do you help, and why do you care about being on this show, funding faith and future tech, and maybe a little bit of the SaaS Yacht Club context, because we'll definitely share that out with the community as well.
Yeah, perfect. Happy to do it. Aaron McReynolds, co-founder and CEO at Alysio. On a personal background, I was born and raised in the UK, lived in Australia for about 10 years, over 3 different stints. I actually lived in New Zealand for 2 years and have now been in the US for the last 15 years. As I mentioned, co-founder of Alysio, we're a go-to-market AI native platform that connects all of your existing go-to-market applications into one AI native interface that allows you to query the data across all of those silos, right back to those applications, and then apply agentic workflows over the top to really command revenue across those fragmented silos in the go-to-market org.
Command fragmented revenue across silos and agentic AI. I love to hear all about those. That's phenomenal. How are you uniquely positioned with that technology today?
Yeah, we started back in January of last year, reaching out to all of the leading go-to-market applications. We were actually building MCPs for them before they had their own. And so we've actually had the opportunity to build the largest marketplace of go-to-market MCPs that exist today. Over the top of all of those MCPs, we've built the orchestration layer. So being able to determine where the data lives in each of those silos, and then a revenue context engine over the top of that, to then obviously get the deepest context from within those applications, making sure that, we're not just, regurgitating data out of those platforms, but actually adding insights and actions that you can go and take on that data. So pretty exciting time to be building, especially in the go-to-market space. And yeah, we had an early start on the technology.
We always talk about first mover advantage. And then obviously we talk about, once you have the early adopters, then you have the maturity phase. So the claim of being the largest marketplace for MCPs, I'm not an expert in that. So for people who are maybe tuning in for the first time, we have over 30 people now across all major platforms watching. What is an MCP and what is an MCP marketplace?
Yeah, so the MCPs, model context protocol servers, essentially the way that we integrate AI into existing applications. What it allows us to do is within the wrapper of the MCP, we have built all of the tools. So part of that process of us building the marketplace is going to the head of partnerships, technology partnerships at these organizations, saying this is what we would like to extract from your application. These are the ways that our customers want to be able to write back into your application. And so because we control that and have approval to be able to do that, being able to build out the marketplace one by one, obviously you get the first two or three, others then want to make sure that their application is within the marketplace. They don't want to miss out. And so now we have companies come to us asking to have their MCPs in that marketplace. And for us, we have a bold take. We believe that these legacy SaaS applications will become back-end databases. We don't want to live out of 15 to 30 different tabs. We don't want to have to try and figure out the context across all of those systems and stitch it together. That's where AI can come in and streamline that entire process. And so that kind of concept of one interface that we'll ever have to live out of and go to market really is why we started the platform.
Yeah, I like to hear the marketplace concept. And we can talk about technology all day long.
Mhm.
And I like that the technology is ever changing and ever growing. In fact, for those folks who were originally in data science and machine learning, I mean, there are now hundreds of thousands of marketplaces in that space, and they
Mhm.
are struggling with the heavy lift to get those MO workloads into large language models. And then, of course, from a large language model into agentic flows that are driving automation, and where, to your point, you now are managing a much larger data estate. And so I'm curious, just keeping that future technology mindset, as the technology expands and grows, how will you plan to stay future forward thinking in your approach to the marketplace?
Yeah, I would say even in the last year since we started building the platform, the technology has, the velocity behind AI right now is just pretty unprecedented. And so, we actually try and make sure that we're, as future facing as possible, staying up to date on all of the technology. We have partnerships with the frontier models to make sure, we're on the most advanced models. We know what's coming down the pipeline and making sure we can stay ahead of that. Now, I would be surprised if anyone can predict where we're going to be in a year or two. And so I think the goal of founders and CEOs right now is to stay up to date on that technology. And it's funny, we had an existing product, we were servicing, tons of customers, and we took a really bold bet to pivot the entire company back in January because we just knew that this technology was going to accelerate what we could do. It was always the concept essentially of where we wanted to get to with the existing product, but the architecture was now legacy. And so we just jumped on it and swung for the fences, saying this is where technology is going. We can either be late to the party or jump on it early. And so we did. And, big bet that's now paying off extremely well. But it is now, my job as the founder to keep the vision. And I think the role of every founder is to be able to look around the corner. What is coming? How do we stay relevant? And essentially listening to customers of the pains they want to solve with the technology that's available. And oftentimes they don't know how to connect those two. And I think that's our role.
Yeah, the piece about a growing company and leadership, especially as the CEO of a company, right? You have to be vision oriented, right? Where you can see that long-term vision. And as you see that long-term vision, it's then our role, right, to then lead with the vision and then measure the outcomes. And of course, bringing on the right team to be able to help you do that. So
Mhm.
we've got some comments. Speaking of team, I see lots of folks commenting. By the way, thank you. We see we've got some fans here. Actually, Aaron is the best, great leader and innovator. Wow, I love that. This is one of the benefits of joining on live stream. Thank you for tuning in. Whiskey Wednesday is on here. We also have lots of folks just saying hello. Maybe you've even seen this. If you want your comment to be on screen, please do that. Obviously, lots of questions. We'll get to those in a little bit. But I wanted to ask you more about the role of SaaS Yacht Club and community in building your organization, being surrounded by other people. Shout out SaaS Yacht Club, Jesse, and all the team. What role has community and community organizations helped you in staying relevant with your peers and partners?
Yeah, I think that's how we got connected, right? A mutual friend of both of ours in a community that he's built in the go-to-market space. We're part of Pavilion, we're part of a number of different communities, and at the early stages of any you know startup, even companies going through growth, word of mouth, referrals. We didn't write a single line of code for our platform until we'd interviewed over 100 CROs and VPs of RevOps. And the reason being is within that community that we built, 30 of those people we interviewed actually became board advisors. And so for us, it's always listening to the boots on the ground, leveraging networks to be able to expand the people that we can be in front of, get the technology in front of, but also to be able to hear what are the pains and struggles that people are dealing with on a daily basis. To me, there's no point building a product as good as the technology can be if it's not solving the pains of the people that you're trying to serve. And so that's why we try and be as active as we can in Slack communities, online communities, and you and I are connected on WhatsApp, and we have a little community on WhatsApp. And I think it's really important, one, as a way to be able to interact and obviously pitch your product, but more importantly, just to listen. And I think far too often, we live in our little bubbles of our own companies and maybe our little circles of people working in the same space. But so many good ideas and inputs into our product have come from those communities. And so we try and stay as active as we can.
Yeah, I love that, especially the human to human aspect of it, especially in a technology driven world, right? And you've traveled a lot yourself. I heard New
I have.
Zealand and the UK. And so when you travel so much, I love that as a result of that, you understand the importance of that need to focus on the human to human connection. And yeah, we got connected. If you were an AI robot, or if you
Mhm.
were a non-human entity that I was engaging with, first of all, I would know that you were not like me as a human,
Yep.
but I would also know that, yeah, maybe I might not trust you, or maybe I might ask another type of a sort of a question. So yeah, I'm glad that you shouted out community and put an importance there. And I also wanted to highlight the importance of interviews in product development.
Mhm.
As a former chief product officer of Grab TV, talking to your customer and really understanding their life, right? I heard you say over 100 CROs, chief revenue officers, and over 100 heads of revenue, et cetera, heads of sales, heads of marketing. What was that process like in building your future tech?
Yeah, I think, we've made a lot of mistakes. One of the best decisions I ever made was putting a head of product in charge of CS in the early days. And the reason being, it was just direct feedback, right? I just wanted him to be able to hear exactly what our customers were saying, the pain points they had, the things they wanted to solve for. That then helped shape our roadmap and continues to do so. We actually obsess over CS, and every customer we have, we put into a Slack channel with direct feedback. And even within our application, it's a chat interface to begin with. You press one button and it's a direct loop to go and create tickets with the dev team, right? Feedback, product suggestions, and we never want to stop that process. Right. Again, we're building for our customers. If we don't know what they want, what they need, what they're trying to solve for, I think you miss out on the ability to continue to shape the product and again, deliver at the highest standard. And so having that head of product be in charge of CS from day one, I
Right.
encourage every startup to go with that approach. And again, as the founder, I'm also in charge of CS, but yeah,
Yeah.
having product with that direct touch is so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, bridging that gap from product to CS, it's almost not just head of operations, but hey, we're building this product and if we have a lot of revenue coming in month one, but a lot of it churning in month three, then none of us are going to win. Customer doesn't win. They don't get their problem solved. Internally, we're wrapping our heads around what went wrong. And so the line that's going to stand out to me most from this bit, we're going to have to clip it, is we interviewed 100 customers before we ever built a line of code, or in this world, went to a Vibe app where we had to speak to code. We didn't do
Mhm.
any development or any product until we spoke to 100 customers. So I love that little bit. And focusing on the funding aspect of this, funding is an important aspect. Obviously, most startups these days want to be revenue driven and funded. Some startups are actually seeking capital. The capital
Mhm.
markets since 2020 have been very difficult, very hard. The bar has been set even higher. In fact, as an ex-Microsoft myself, we're laying off not just 5,000 employees or 10,000 like we used to, but no, you're seeing 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people being let go of major Fortune 100 companies because of the technology. And to a degree, the ROI on the COGS is no longer there. So, from a funding perspective, really curious to hear about your funding journey from January of last year and what role that funding has played in terms of serving more of your customers today.
Yeah, we went on a pretty unique funding journey. So, originally we both had full-time jobs. I was working in sales at a cloud security company. We had the concept of what we wanted to build. We just did a small 250K angel round, and that was for us to go and start
Wow.
developing the product, get us off the ground. But we were fortunate enough to, be paired with a really great pre-seed investor out of the Bay, and then the co-founder of Splunk invested in that round. And so that kind of started our trajectory. We then did a pre-seed of 1.4 million and then a seed round of 3.3 million. And so what we've been able to do with that funding is go through that pivot, right? We've had to be very cash conscious in the early days. But again, we had enough runway to be able to take the bet to go into pivot. But for us, going on the VC train, has allowed us to grow quickly. And I think that's the whole purpose and intent of taking venture capital is you see an opportunity that you believe can be a massive market. People believe in that vision, customers prove out that vision, and then we continue to be on that flywheel. So heading into Series A this year, and we continue to want to go and move as quickly as possible. The infrastructure and the architecture of our platform demands capital, and so that's the journey that we're on. Yeah, but I've got some horror stories from the early days for another time.
That your startup journey began with just 250K from a wealthy angel, and that was in the Bay Area. Now one and a half, so it's just in 25, you said, right?
That was in 2023.
Okay. So for those of you who are tuning into this later, 3 years ago, almost exactly, was the first initial infusion of angel funding. And it sounds like it was just one individual who did that. Is that right?
Yeah. So we had a pre-seed, venture group that came in, a
Mhm.
small check, and then two angels.
Okay, awesome. So how did you manage expectations so you could return value to those early investors?
Yeah, I think that's part of the journey that we're still on is continuing to be able to do that. I think by going and doing that small angel round, we were just trying to test the hypothesis. We had people that believed in the vision of what we uh, wanted to create. That first product that we had was actually the development of a spreadsheet of a sales process that I'd run at historical companies. That again was trying to look around the corner and say, okay, can we go and streamline a process? Can we add value to something that people trusted in and already utilized, and do it in a more technology efficient way? And so that a small infusion of capital that allowed us to go in full time on this and to really test it out. And we obviously had great traction to start, and then that began the larger funding rounds.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And I am just a complete and total newbie here when it comes to maybe more corporate or traditional funding. So, as someone who's new to investing and funding in the startup space, one of the reasons why we have the show here on funding faith and future tech, which we're going to get to our topics here, which I'm really excited about here in a second, is because I want to learn myself from other experts like yourself who have secured that funding. And so, after that 250K in year one, I heard you say you went to a $3.3 million round. Tell us more about that journey from super early pre-seed stage, conceptual validation, get you full time to that 3.3 round. What was that journey like? And how long did it take you to get there?
Yeah. So, for us, the initial check allowed us to go build the product, get those early customers on. And we were fortunate, some of the logos that we were able to capture in the early days, I think told that story of what was capable with that product. As we go, you think about the funding process. One, it's a difficult journey, right? Everybody knows that. It's not only just hard to secure funding, but to continue to get funding. And there's milestones that you have to hit, and there's stories that you have to tell. And so in between those rounds, knowing that the original product that we built, while it was driving value for the customers, we didn't feel internally like it's where technology was going. And so for any founder that's been through, a pivot or an evolution of their product, that's always a tough conversation with investors, right? To turn around and say, hey, the original concept that you invested in, we're actually going to change that. But here's the vision of where we believe it can go. And I think more than anything, having done those 100 plus interviews, was proof points for us that what we wanted to go and build was the right thing, and that people wanted that type of a product in their ecosystem. And so we actually felt more assured going through the pivot, maybe even than we were on the original product. I think it's one of the biggest learnings I had is I would say we got fortunate in fundraising on that first product, because it was more of just I've used this in a spreadsheet. I see the opportunity of what it can become as a product, but we didn't do those kind of customer interviews the way that I wish we would have. So again, I think we got fortunate to be on the funding journey, but the product we have now and what we've been building for the last year was validated time and time and time again. And now, customers being in that product continues to validate that. Now it's the journey of, okay, is that still at the forefront of technology? And as we go into the next funding rounds, we have to continue to, tell the same velocity story and tell the same technology story, if not better right now, because it's insanely competitive.
Yeah. I love that aspect of the interviews. Did you complete those interviews, the customer interviews pre-funding to validate the idea?
In between funding rounds. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So for anyone who's getting started in kind of just at the very beginning of that stage, maybe you're a corporate person who's fully employed now, maybe you're in another startup and thinking about your next move, or maybe you're someone who's looking to invest into other startups. Look at their customer research and data and look at the recency of those conversations. Because today, I mean, in just 2 weeks, in 2 months, even in 2 years, the technology landscape changes so fast and so quickly. And then as you move into those funding rounds, you'll still need customer validation, and customer validate with their pocketbook, with their checkbook, with cash, right? And so, in terms of where you're at, in terms of customer funding today, at what point do you sense that you'll either break even or get to a place where you're fully customer funded? Or will you still go the venture route and seek to exit at some point with your investors? I mean, what is that funding strategy mid startup roadmap is really the key question there. And what role does customer revenue play in that?
Yeah, I think, if you're on the venture train, there's a reason you stay on it. It's you see the
Mhm.
opportunity, you need the capital to accelerate, beat out competition, continue to move first. And again, I think it's just that velocity story. It's like, the more capital we have, the faster we can go. I think one of the biggest challenges right now, David, is the talent war. right? And so that's where I see capital as, one of the most important levers that we have, is to be able to go get great talent. Everyone wants to build at the forefront of technology. We've seen some of the offers from Meta and OpenAI, and unfortunately, like, that is the same arena that we have to compete in, and I think every company has to compete in right now in the AI space. And so how do you go and continue to attract and retain great talent? Unfortunately, you have to play that game. You have to make great offers. You have to make people feel validated. And so, I think we'll continue to stay on the VC train, just because of the nature of what we're trying to build and what we feel like the opportunity will be.
Awesome. So I typically don't ask this question, but I'm curious, since you are on the VC train, how do you think about exit strategy, and at what point will you say, yeah, we've reached a certain ROI for our investors. We know that we've met that goal. At what point do you think that you'll get to a place where those investors get to a place where you also can exit as well? What can you share with us about that exit strategy as it relates to your funding plan?
Yeah, it's funny. I think times we're in an interesting time. Historically, every founder's like, "Oh, I want to build for an IPO," but now you look at the private markets and what companies like Databricks are doing, and just continue to get funding and growing, and then giving back to their employees. And so, I was at a company. We were, I think, Series F at the time. We were planning on IPOing midweek, and on the Sunday before that IPO, we got purchased, right? And so I don't think you can predict exactly what that story is going to look like, what that journey is going to look like. But as a founding team, we're building for the long haul, and that's always going to be our focus. So whether it's IPO or acquisition, who knows? But I think that's the goal that we're driving towards, is to one day be a public company.
I love hearing that. So I'm saying today that back in X years ago, I got to speak to a future public company officer on my live stream, on our live stream together. So that's just wonderful. I love that that's such a stated goal. And your team can really get behind that. They know that they're
Mhm.
building toward that, the way you deploy equity, the way that you incentivize your team. I mean, I went through the same experience myself in my own personal life as a contributing member and human to the world, was that, yeah, it's hard to find other good people.
Mhm.
So that's a good transition actually into the majority of our conversation today, which is going to be about faith, the second main topic of funding, faith, and future tech. So let's just start at the ground zero. What does faith mean to you, Aaron? What does faith actually mean to you?
Yeah, that was a topic I was very excited to talk about. And I'm probably unique in this experience as well. I was born and raised in a extremely religious household. Um, I served a mission for my church for 2 years when I was 19 years old. Went to a different country. I was able to talk to my parents once a week via email, and I could Skype call once a year, twice a year, Mother's Day and Christmas. And so I was actually, on a very different faith journey for about 32 years. And then, yeah, I actually left that religion and have been on, pretty developmental faith journey for the last few years, trying to figure out what does that now mean outside of the constructs of an organized religion. And so I think it's something I'm still continuing to develop and understand for myself. But people always ask me if I regret spending so long in an organized religion, and I don't. I think it shaped who I am as a person. That mission changed the entire trajectory of my life. I wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have my kids if I hadn't have done that. By way, again, of connections and who I met through that process. And so right now, I would say I'm in the middle, of a kind of deep soul searching, and what does faith really mean, as you think about the context of deity and the way that interacts with my day-to-day life. And then I think more than anything, children, how am I going to teach them about faith, and what does that mean to them? So yeah, I'm excited to chat through this.
Yeah, I love that. So, our first topic today is leadership philosophy. And so the intersection of faith is the second topic, and the third is going to be spirituality and innovation. So these three topics play precisely into your role as a husband and father. So I'm not a husband, I'm not a father, so I could not speak from my own lived experiences, but I do have a father. I have a divine father. So
Mhm.
tell me also kind of what does leadership mean to you, Aaron, in the context of just you being a human being? And I really want to lean into the role that leadership plays in each of the quote unquote titles or roles that you have. But yeah, tell me more about the leadership philosophy that you have today and how that early childhood religion has played a role into your leadership philosophy.
Yeah, great question. I think when I look at my life, I think you always look at others for examples. And so, I think I had this example of leadership within religion and how that organized religion had constructed leadership. I'm a massive sports guy. I've always played sports. I've been in team sports, competitive sports. I've had role models and leaders within sports. And then I look at my own father and the way that he led our family. And so I think personally, a lot of that is kind of shaped how I think about leadership. I think I've found myself defaulting to a trust based leadership model. And what I mean by that, David, is when we employ someone, from day one, I trust you. I employed you because I believe you are better at your job than I am or any current employee that we have. That's why we brought you into this organization. And so from day one, I enable people as much as I can to bring their skill sets, to bring their own, leadership into the organization and push Alysio forward. Right. I think that's the purpose and intent. Hire people better than yourself and give them the freedom to run and go and shape what we can become as an organization. And then on a personal front, I that's probably transparent, but I was never great at school. I was kind of a middle of the pack student. And so, that kind of shaped my life of, okay, if I'm not going to be the top A student, what can I do? And so I spent the majority of my collegiate years trying to network. We hosted parties at college, trying to just meet as many people as I could, because I knew I was probably at a disadvantage going into the workforce at some time. And so what happened is I did an advertising degree at BYU. And then my first job out of school was at Goldman Sachs as an investment management analyst. Now, most people don't make that journey, but I was able to get my resume into that pile because someone I'd met in college who worked at Goldman Sachs and submitted my resume. Then in the interview process, the VP that had been there for 27 years said I was the first person who had applied that she'd ever seen with an advertising degree, wanted to go into finance and had to see what I was about. And I think that little story has always dictated how I think about my life and my journey and how I want to lead people is, through interview processes, I don't just look at what's on the paper, right? It's not about what's on that piece of paper, the grades they got. I want to know the person. I want to know what they can bring to the table. And again, in a life where I've lived in multiple different countries, traveled to different countries, experienced different cultures, we want the same thing here at Alysio. We want the unique point of view, people who think outside the box, and then we try and enable them to run.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much there. What stands out to me is a trust-based leadership. It's kind of like I give you unlimited trust, right? Until
Mhm.
you break the trust, but still from a place of forgiveness and leaning into true trustworthiness. That takes time, right? That
Mhm.
takes real intent. And in the context of business, trusting your employees, trusting your contractors, your partners, trusting your team, trusting the people that you probably invest more time with sometimes than even your marital partner or your kids, especially in startup phase. Now, we're not talking about work-life balance or anything like that. We're just talking about leadership
Mhm.
philosophy and being able to trust your team in hiring really smart people is so important. Now, what happens in terms of your leadership philosophy when that trust is broken? How do you maintain your own integrity when something goes wrong or conflict happens? Or we've all been there. You get into that situation where you come at a crossroads, and maybe it's just not a fork in the road, but you have many options and your leadership is really being tested. How do you continue to implement a trust based leadership philosophy into the way that you manage conflict?
Yeah, it's funny, I go back to my time at Goldman Sachs, as a first year analyst. I had a leader that said to me, you can ask any question once, just don't ask me it twice. And I think what, I took from that is everyone has to learn. People are going to make mistakes. I think that's just part of life. Nobody is perfect in their job, in their life. And so for me, like everyone gets a chance to mess up and make a mistake. If that same thing starts to become a pattern and is repetitive, or the effort drops, I'm always about kind of course correction. And I've had conversations with previous employees. To me, it's always like, do you want to be here? Do you still believe in the vision? Are you bringing your best? And are we giving you what you need and expected out of this role? And if all those things still align, then it's just about coaching and really, I think, listening to that individual, knowing where the constraints are. I think everything happens for a reason. Drops in performance happen for a reason. Could be home life, it could be mental health, anything. It's my job to be able to understand that. And I've had leaders in the past that didn't think that way, and it was straight to the worst case scenario. But I found that most of the time people are inherently good and have the right intentions and want to perform to their best. But that doesn't happen every day, all day, every hour of the day. And so I think it's now going in and making sure that we coach and listen to that individual in a way that continues to build them up and be a productive, member of the team.
Yeah, I love that. And trusting the team as well, especially in a world where I would say we're AI or we're technology augmented, right? Where
Mhm.
AI is supporting it. And especially, for example, in meetings or in presentations, we can summarize and ask those questions before even interacting with the human. And to your point, don't ask the same question twice. It's like, don't make the same mistake twice. I
Yeah.
promise I won't ask you the same question twice on this live stream.
Good.
But
Very
when
good.
someone asks a question twice, my initial thought is, well, I wonder if they understood the question the first time around,
Mhm.
and why are they actually asking this a second time in a row?
Yeah. I've seen both sides of the coin, and I think it's more about, you know, I think in that context, it's an effort-based thing, right? Like if I asked the
Mm,
first time,
right.
context was given, and then I'm coming back like, "What'd you say? How did it work? I forgot." Things like that. I think it trained me personally from day one in my career to always be as switched on as possible and to try and digest the context. And I think I felt like it would then fall on me if I didn't understand to get the clarity in the moment rather than having this fear of going back to a VP or an MD at Goldman Sachs and asking the same question twice. So that's kind of how I was trying to frame it.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're asking the same question and you could have Googled it. There was that tool that came out like Google for you,
Yeah,
where I took my mouse cursor, put it on Google, and clicked Google for you, and then send them that link. It's like, yeah, did you Google this?
that's
But
it. Yeah.
yeah, so we have so many comments that are showing up. By the way, if you're tuning in for the first time with Aaron and myself on the David Daily Show across all major platforms, first of all, thank you. Please leave a comment. Please show us that you're listening. I see tons of comments. I'm going to just go ahead and put these in here. Jesse's saying, "Oh yeah, it's great to, you want to be here, team here. Everything happens for a reason. Insightful. No matter what you believe, make sure you believe in yourself. One day soon." Um, so much here, and we have some questions as well, which we'll save for the end. But kind of as we go into our second topic of consideration, wanted to say, how do you intersect your leadership with that faith-based values, right? What role does the intersection of faith play in your role personally, but also in the context of your business, where you'll have people with multiple different kinds of faiths, different religions, different types of practices. How do you, as a leader, intersect faith in the workplace?
Yeah, we are not unique in that sense. Even our team is not everyone is religious. Not everyone's of the same faith, even. And so I think as a leader, to me, obviously, I don't think it's that important to bring personal religion into the workplace that often, but we want to be aware, and it's the intention to not offend or upset, to be cognizant of personal holidays, times when people need a fast, things like that. I think that all comes into saying you're a human when you work here. We want to understand you, be cognizant of what you are going through from a personal standpoint as that pertains to your faith and your religion, and trying not to offend or make light of anybody's choices when it comes to faith. Me personally, I think from leaving organized religion, I've had to spend a lot of time, instead of going to a church for 2 hours every Sunday to feel spiritually fed, I'm now trying to figure out, how do I get that in my own life? What do I need to do? When you think about the concept of God and whatnot, to me, it's to love people, and that is a hard intersection, right? Especially in the workplace. But I hope that our employees, my wife actually said it to me after our Christmas party. I got choked up and emotional talking about one of our top performers. And I think I realized in that moment, like, I care deeply about the people that work here. And I'm proud of people succeeding. We had one employee that left because they wanted to go start their own company. And to me, I've never been so proud. It's like, no, that's what I would love to see from someone who works here, to be able to learn, grow themselves, and have that confidence to go and do something on their own. And I think that's kind of where faith comes in for me. Is I've found that I don't need to go to a source per se to find spirituality. I think within each of us, we are spiritual beings here for like an earthly experience. That's kind of my frame of reference. And so I think I can turn inward. I've been meditating, spending a lot of time focusing on that. I set it as my personal goal for the quarter to meditate 90 minutes, every single week. That can be broken up in days or in one go. But for me, especially as a founder, trying to find that time to work on myself, as well as try and help the team and to work on them, that window becomes smaller and smaller every week. And so I have to make a really focused effort to work on myself, to make sure that I am spiritually fed, to make sure that I am mentally fed. Because if I'm not able to perform at my highest level, I can't help anyone else. And I truly believe that. And so it really has been a focused effort, I would say, in the last 6 months, particularly, to find that time to reset, to refocus. I think what's hard about that, though, David, is the world that we live in, right? This concept of AI, what we know it could potentially do to humanity, what it does to 50,000 people being laid off at Fortune 100 companies. That's a strange intersection right now, I'll be honest, of knowing that we're trying to build a great product to help people, but part of the mess on the side of that is people's lives get affected. And I don't beat around the bush and being aware of that and trying to acknowledge that. But we always think, we're trying to build a tool that's going to enable people to be better, to get more time back. So we'll see where the future goes on that front.
Yeah, I love it. I have a couple of thoughts. The first thing I wanted to mention was our nonprofit and service organization that we promote on this show is called AI and Faith. And it is a faith-based nonprofit focusing on pluralistic religions around the world, bringing the world's wisdom into the technology scene, focusing on ethics and morals. It's called AI and Faith. You can learn more about AI and Faith at aiandfaith.org and become an expert in your area of technology focus or religion. And I was curious, as a kid, what religion did you grow up in, Aaron? I'm curious.
Yeah, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more popularly known as Mormonism.
Good. Were you in Utah by any chance?
I
ever?
am currently in Utah. So
Perfect. Exactly. What a setup. So I
yeah.
grew up actually Baptist in a very traditional and I would say fundamental Baptist. So what
Mhm,
our religions share is our holy scripture and holy text. The
mhm,
King James version of the Bible, the only version of the Bible, I say that facetiously so. There are many transliterations and translations of the King James version. And of course, there are many texts across all religions. Of course, the Quran is one of those as well. So, from a purely religious point of view, there are religious practices, there are religion and ritual types of practices, and then there are relational types of experiences, right? And
mhm,
also, for example, most religions pray or have some form of communication to a deity or a set of deities if they're deistic or plural deistic, right? One god or many gods. So what AI and faith does, right, is it brings Islamic, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, atheist, Taoism, all of the above into the conversation. And I'll quote Brad Smith, who is the president and chief legal officer at Microsoft. He said about 3 or 4 years ago that we need to bring the religions of the world to the table when building technology. Because if we don't, then we'll have immoral technology. We'll have robots that take over the world. We'll have autonomous weapons that destroy us all. And none of us want that. Certainly not myself, not yourself. And humanity as a whole will protect itself. I like this one quote of, we can debate religion all day long, but we can't debate personal relationship. And so at the workplace, the intersection of faith and work, I appreciate how you create safe spaces for people in the workplace to practice their religion and integrate their faith, no matter what faith or religion that they have in the workplace. Now, the question I have for you next from an intersection concept for our topic number two here is, how do you apply faith based concepts of ethics and morality into the way that you're building technology?
yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's a really deep question. Um,
Hmm.
it's funny, our kind of internal motto, and what we've preached since day one of our company is empower the individual, right? And I think the concept of that is even within sales. I've never met two sellers that sell the same way. Uh, it's always a relationship based sale backed by some science and metrics and methodology. But at the end of the day, I think humans want to buy from humans still today. I think that may shift at some point, but right now, like and at the end of the day, I think that's all built on trust. And so, I think being understanding of the individual within the workplace, I think being understanding of the individual when you're getting on a call to pitch and to present. It's something that I take personally, like really seriously. I want to be able to make sure that when I'm on calls with people in different countries of different faiths, I'm respectful even of time zones, of religious holidays, whatever it may be. At the end of the day, empower the individual, trust the individual, and make them feel safe and secure, and allow them to be able to do their best work. And so, for me, I think that's where I try and bring all of this together. I know that I have a point of view on the world that not everyone agrees with, and that's okay. And I think people in our team have views on the world that are different to mine, and that is okay. To me, it's about creating a place where each individual feels empowered to be themselves. We have two new hires starting on Monday, and I kind of laughed. She emailed and said, what should I wear to the office? And I'm like, like whatever you feel comfortable in. Like that's the day and age that I think we live in. I spent the majority of my career wearing a shirt and slacks and dress shoes, and I never felt comfortable because I would never wear that outside of the workplace. I know some people like it, but I just want people to come here, be themselves, be their authentic selves, because at the end of the day, we're building technology that's not really that way. It will become that way, I think. But I think as a human to human connection and workplace, be your individual self.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. It's so different. I remember the consultant's uniform, we would call it
Yeah,
when we were consulting with Microsoft. It
yeah,
would have been like, yeah, slacks, khaki slacks and a blue polo, right?
yeah,
And
with a
I
puffer
always
vest over
appreciated
the
that.
top.
What's that?
With your puffer vest over the top.
Exactly, exactly. It's got to be Patagonia vest.
Patagonia. Yeah.
So funny. But yeah, that's so real. It's so funny you said two people starting on Monday. We had two new people start today, actually, on our stand up this morning. And you go through those new introductions and around the table, around the horn, and you absolutely love the new energy. And that is a spiritual thing, right? We are human beings, right? But we're actually spiritual beings in a human world. And so, our
Mhm.
third and final topic, we don't have enough time for it today, but spirituality and innovation, it really aligns with our top three topics, right? So, wanting to hear how you seek the divine or seek your spiritual connection with God. Should I say God, capital G, since we probably philosophically believe that there is maybe one God. And maybe you have a different belief, and that's okay. But how does spirituality lead you and you as a husband, a father, a CEO, right? A fiduciary to investors? I mean, you're more than your titles, right? But how do you incorporate spirituality? And I think I heard you also say in the last 6 months, you really invested a lot into your own personal self
Mhm.
so you can be the best version of yourself. What does spirituality mean to you, and how do you integrate that into your company?
Yeah, I think spirituality is a compass, a moral compass, whether dictated by somebody else in a leadership position in an organized religion, whether dictated by a book. Um, and so kind of going out on my own, I think, just with me and my wife, it was a conversation we had to have, right? You've been dictated of what that moral compass should look like for 30 odd years. And, as a member of the LDS church, it's a pretty strict moral compass that they outline for you, to be able to then go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what is our spiritual compass? What are we going to teach our children of what we believe their spiritual compass should be? We kind of defaulted to, what is right for you. And I think at the base of that, for me, it's integrity, right? It's one of the hardest things to stand by in the line of business that we're in. I've seen friends, I've seen other founders, I've seen VCs, I've seen everybody where that line of integrity can easily be crossed. And at the end of the day, whether it's God with a capital G that we're responsible to, or ourselves that we're responsible to, at some point, I think we'll get judged on our actions here on this earth as a human, as a father, as a husband, as a friend. And so I take it pretty seriously. And I think, one of the things that I'm proudest of in my life is what I try and do outside of myself. Like, we started a soccer group about 7 years ago. Just a couple guys who wanted to stay active in the morning and play soccer. And that group has now evolved into 30 people. And those 30 people I've seen rally together for people in that group who have lost children, who are going through hard times financially, spiritually. And I think, honestly, personally, David, I think that's what this life is about, is, loving whatever deity you have in your life. And then I still believe in that second great commandment, to love others as you love yourself. And if at the end of my life, Alysio goes well and you have all the money you could ever dream of, but you're a horrible person and you don't put others first, I don't see meaning and purpose in that. And that doesn't bring me joy in my life. And so I think defaulting to finding where can you step in, be an example to others, keep that moral compass pointing in the direction that you believe. And again, might not be the same as everyone else. But to be proud of who you are as an individual and to uplift other people. I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, I really appreciate your perspective on this, Aaron. And it's really about looking inwardly, especially from an integrist point of view. First of all, being honest with yourself is so important, and doing what's right when no one is looking. I
Mhm.
think as we go and grow older, right? And more experience, you try not to make the same mistakes. You do your best. But there's also mercy, right? Which means not getting the punishment that I deserve. And also there is grace, which is a free gift that only God
Mhm.
can give you. Now, I'm not getting too theological here, but for those of you who have difficulty healing or forgiving others, I've learned that I must forgive myself and become a better man. And listening to you as a father and as a husband, it's something that I aspire to be someday as well. And your perspective on the role of spirituality and integrity in that is so incredibly important. I don't feel qualified, right, to be able to speak on these topics. And that's why I like having you on here, because you aren't qualified either. And we can have two
No.
qualified men talking about our own life experiences. It's been a wonderful pleasure, by the way, having you on the
Thank you.
David Daily Show. I think we're up to some 30 odd episodes. And we have a special segment on this show called Beyond the Bag. Behind the scenes, producers are telling us that you have a special thing that you travel with beyond the bag. And I wanted to see what you're going to share with the audience on Beyond the Bag.
Yeah, I was laughing with Jesse as we were preparing. I'm actually going to show you a bag. Um, my
Nice.
my wife is in fashion and influencing, and she drew a line in the sand that I was not allowed to have backpacks. She's like, backpacks are for school kids. So for Christmas, she bought me this bag that I take everywhere when I travel. Fits the laptop, fits my headphones, my phone, whatever it may be. And so, one, I love it because when I take it, I know it's something that she bought me, but as well, I think it's taught me in my life to always try and present myself as well as I can. Like I represent my family, I represent our company, and so I'm always trying to stay not just up to date on AI trends, but fashion trends, things like that too. And so it's an important part of my life that I enjoy, that I know not everyone appreciates, but yeah, that's my little bag.
It's so funny because I do have a backpack. It's a black Tumi backpack. It's right here. It's the only thing I travel with, just one bag.
Yeah.
And I'll have to tell everyone that you called me a school kid. That's so funny. I'm always learning, but
Controversial,
it's so
but there
funny.
you go. No.
My Beyond the Bag today is my slip resistant Velcro shoes that are the only pair of shoes that I carry with me while traveling full time. They get you through the water when it's slippery, but also they're very comfortable. I can run in them, walk in them, hike in them. I typically would be bringing with me a black pair of boots, but in the warm weather, it's they're big and bulky. I met another guy recently who was traveling technologist who had some Doc Martin boots, but you know what? Your trusty shoes, right? They take you places and they keep you safe. I really like your satchel because it reminds you that you're not a school kid, and it reminds you of your partner and wife and family. And I really love that because what is it worth if we, gain the whole world, right? If we build the biggest business with all of the numbers and all the metrics with the largest team, but we lose our soul or we
Mhm.
lose our satchel. So I'm glad that you have a nice modern designer satchel with you. It's like a beautiful color. It goes well with your complexion and your skin. So this has been such a wonderful show.
I've
We've
enjoyed it.
had hundreds of people watch and tap in across all platforms. Really good. So how can people stay connected with you if they want to get connected with you, Aaron?
Yeah, I live on LinkedIn. I think I missed maybe 5 or 6 days last year being on LinkedIn. So please message me, reach out. Always looking to connect with new people, hear their experiences, their stories, and that's how we got connected. I can connect the dots to exactly how I've met you, David. So yeah, please ping
Exactly.
me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. And then we also flash your website up as well. I just want to specifically highlight the best customer, that would be appropriate to get connected with you to do business. So just a quick shout out or call out for the types of people that would be good partners or customers for your business.
Yeah, we sell to primarily to CROs of B2B SaaS companies that usually have, 50 to 100 plus people in their go-to-market organization, drowning in sales tools and fragmented silos, and want to unify those applications and apply an AI layer to it. So Alysio.ai.
Awesome. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for that. So, if you're a CRO with over 50 people, 60, 70 people in your organization, reach out to Aaron on LinkedIn. He can help you with your go to market tools and your agentic AI strategy. All right, we're going to close off the show. Aaron, it was a pleasure having you. See you
Oh,
on the
absolute
next
pleasure.
show.